Uh, Eric, I would do the note taking again, except I'll be demoing first. Will, if you want to take notes, I'm happy to take notes after.
I can take notes during. All right, so today is November 6th, and this is SIG Testing, and I am Eric Veda, and we have a couple items on the agenda to get a demo of from Andrew about Yakety, and then potentially talking about the GitHubification of Prow. So Andrew, if you would like to take us away.
Thank you, Eric. So yeah, let me share my screen here. I'll start with Safari, I suppose, and then I'll have to switch. So what is Yakety? Well, I have a little deck here and then end with a quick demo of the agenda. Let's get right into it. So there are really kind of three types of people that I've seen that work with Kubernetes. The operators, like sysadmins, people actually using Kubernetes. The people building and testing apps for and with Kubernetes. And then finally, really, I think a lot of us, developers building and testing Kubernetes and core Kubernetes components. And so there are definitely solutions for those first two types of people, but there's kind of a gap, a limited set of answers for that third type of people. Certainly kubetest is one of those answers, but that doesn't work for every platform currently, although we should all try to work to extend it. And so Yakety is actually the beginning of addressing that third group of people and extending kubetest. So how does it help? Well, again, it's for those developers building and testing Kubernetes and core Kubernetes components. It has a lot of features similar to kubetests, because again, it's going to be the basis of the kubetest extension for vSphere. It's capable of deploying any version of Kubernetes 110 and greater on generic Linux distros. And it can deploy single node, multi-node, and even multi-control plane node, or what people would call multi-master clusters. This one was sort of important. It is able to deploy nodes with DHCP, but still have certificates that have both the node FQDNs and IPv4 addresses. So no matter how Kubernetes is designed to present the nodes, you shouldn't have any TLS errors. Finally, it's actually a single POSIX compliant shell script, making it fairly portable and customizable. What does a Yakety provision cluster look like? Well, pardon this, it looks a lot better in the SVG format. Let me just, I can show that here, there. Yeah, I just used plant UML and it didn't look great when it generated the PNG. But you've got one or more control plane nodes and one or more worker nodes. There can be control plane nodes that can also schedule workloads, but by default, Yakety prefers control plane nodes to just be control plane. They have the control plane components. They have etcd on each of them. Nginx for load balancers that need to not use TLS for health checks. And then each control plane node runs core DNS unrelated to Kubernetes, and you'll see why in a moment. And then finally, the worker nodes use containerd and then other things that should look familiar. So what we're going to do is a quick demo of the Yakety OVA. And it's designed to deploy Yakety on vSphere or VMware Cloud on AWS, which is just vSphere on a software-defined data center control plane. And it's the quickest way to deploy Yakety, but there are others. But the OVA actually does come with some additional features. All nodes have the same host names and deployed clusters. So you can deploy 5 clusters, and if all those clusters had 3 nodes, 2 controller nodes and 1 worker node, each cluster would have nodes called CO1, CO2, and WO1. And that makes writing tooling very easy. It can bootstrap a multi-cluster from a single OVA. That's great for rapid deployment. It has a service called kubeupdate, and this is where it becomes really friendly to developers. It gives you the ability to update core Kubernetes component binaries on live deployed clusters without having to redeploy the cluster. So, and I'll give a demo of that, but essentially you can SCP, updated kubectl binary and updated kube API server binary to any of the cluster nodes, and then that will be distributed to the rest of the nodes in the cluster, and services will be restarted, yada, yada. And finally, if you're deploying on VMware Cloud on AWS, again known as VMC, the OVA will actually can create a publicly routable load balancer since the cluster nodes will be private. So I'm going to do a quick demo here. I actually already have one deployed, and that's because they can take a while to stand up. I'm going to start a deployment process here, but not actually wait for it to finish, just so that we can jump right into a working cluster. So the reason the OVA is important, I should just skip that, is because with an OVA, with vSphere specifically, you can deploy it from a remote location. And that's not true of like a template or anything else. It needs to be in an OVF or OVA format. And so that means you can deploy it to a vCenter or vCenter instance that doesn't have anything already on it conducive to standing up Kubernetes. So I'm just going to name this Kuds Kube V and choose my resource pool.
So I don't think we're actually seeing the window that you have open.
Oh crap! Let me do that. I was on my desktop now. Thank you. So let me let me just go back a bit then. Sorry about that. Again, what I was saying, you can give it a remote location so that the instance that to which you're deploying doesn't already have to have any information about any templates or any assets on that vCenter, which is great because when I enhance kube test, I don't want to have to expect people deploying to vSphere to have a template available there, because they may not. And so that's why it was very important this being OVA. We could have used an OVA that had cloud init in it, but once you start going that route, it just becomes a little bit simpler to do your own customizations. All right, so here's where you set the values. So you can choose any of the, I don't know the proper word for it, but it's any of the version string patterns that match the release or dev buckets. So release or CI should be familiar, but also importantly, a URL that can point to any staging location. And as long as that location includes these tarballs, you're good to go. So people can deploy staged builds, not staged by kube test. It expects these tarballs to be there. And then I'm going to deploy 3 nodes, 2 control plane members, and 1 control plane member that can schedule workloads. So what that means is there will be 3 nodes. 2 of those nodes will be members of the control plane. 1 of those 2 nodes can schedule workloads, which means you will have a node that is just a worker. And then we enter credentials, and these are for the cloud provider, but they're also for this VM is responsible for cloning itself. And then if you click this, I'm not going to because it makes things take longer. The Yakety will also deploy the Kubernetes test tarball to varlib Kubernetes/EDE on all nodes that can schedule workloads. And we have an image for our conformance tests that host mounts that, so that all Yakety deployed clusters already have the test bits on them. And just you can set logging levels. While that's deploying, I'm going to show you what the one that's already up looks like. So when it stands up, it updates its notes here with some information. And we are going to enable remote app. I never said what Yakety stands for. It stands for yet another Kubernetes installer thingy. I don't know, I just thought that seemed appropriate. There you go. Okay, so that got the cluster information generating commands. So I'm going to export this. So now I should be able to SSH into any of my nodes. hopefully. Oh, wait, I did not do my jump post. 1 second. You can use a jump post if you don't have direct access. So if you export jump post, I just have to reinitialize that. Okay, so that node deployed, you power it on, and I'm going to put this over here, so we'll start to see new VMs come up. Okay, now and so here's where the host names become nice. So I always know what my host names are going to be, and that's why that core DNS is running on each member of the control plane. So it provides DNS for the actual nodes in the cluster, and this is all just specific to Yakety. But I want to do kubectl get nodes, kubectl, and that's going through the load balancer since those are privately routed. And okay. Oh, I had a problem with load balancer, something I did there. Anyway, just ignore that maybe. Yeah, I've been working on it. And then the last thing to show you would be this. Let me find, oh, I made a change to the kubelet. That's what I did. Where did I put that? Here we go, okay. And then I want to show the kube update service. It says no. Oh, I see it there. Sorry, source. Why it's taking so long to SCP it, but I'm sending an updated kubectl to the server, and so while it's doing that, you can see over here that what happens is this node clones itself the number of times that it needs to be cloned based on the number of nodes in the cluster. So that'll make it really easy to stand up clusters of any size. So let's sh into that node. And then if we var log Yakety kube update. Okay, so we can see here it's processing the client upload, kubectl, it skips the outload for itself, but then it uploads it to its other peers. So if I do kubectl now, we see a Kutz was here because that's a custom binary. And that should be the case on any of these. Yep. And so that's the kube update service. So that's basically a quick demo. I'm sorry that there was something broken in there. Like I said, I'd been playing around with the kubelet options because and the reason being is because if you go to the site, you can see that there are directions for installing it using Yakety with the OVA, but also there are instructions for just standing up a single node or multi-node cluster with Vagrant on Ubuntu. The OVA uses Photon OS. My original testing was with CentOS 7, and then the Vagrant work uses Ubuntu. So it's been tested on 3 different Linux distros, and I think it was because I had to change some swap space settings for the Vagrant box. But yeah, if anyone's interested, I believe I put a link in the doc. And again, this is going to be the basis of the enhancement to kubetest. It supports vSphere. But since other people do use vSphere outside of VMware, I thought maybe this could be interesting or useful to people doing their own testing. Specifically, the kube update service has been really useful for some people, colleagues on my team, because they can just do a quick compile of a new Kube API server, for example, and just SCP it up, and it gets rotated across all the different nodes.
Can I copy it to any node, or do I have to copy it to the CO1 node?
You can copy it to any node, just to /cube update, or sorry, /cube dash update. Now all nodes know about all the other nodes. So yeah. Anyway, this is just a project I worked on in my spare time. It's not official for VMware. I
Cool.
did submit it to be open sourced by VMware. We'll see how that goes. But it's already out there because we use it to do conformance testing. So
Nice.
that's it. If anyone has any questions, just let me know, please. Thank you. Oh, real quick, Ben. I think Ben told me this. He's never seen a 4,300 line long shell script. So if anyone, I don't know if anyone can beat that.
Oh,
probably.
We've seen them. They're
Yeah.
fun.
Oh no, it was somebody else who said that. Sorry.
I once wrote an entire database replication management system in Shell.
Well, there you go. And I use, and the only reason I trust it is I use shellcheck.net to make sure that it's compliant and it catches most errors. Although I did find out today that Dash doesn't support pipe fail, which is Ubuntu's default shell, which was weird. Anyway, thanks guys.
Any, that looks pretty cool. Any questions from people?
All right, well, if anyone does have any, please don't hesitate to ping me.
So something I'd be interested in thinking about, is if there are any, I feel like over time, I don't know if there's anything that, would be useful, if there's any patterns or whatnot that would be useful to take into the general, like, test infra, like if you think the, if the copy service is interesting, or if the naming, like the way that you're referencing a version, like maybe that is something that seems similar to how kubetest works, but maybe it's different enough. It'd be nice if there's maybe, if we could start thinking about, ways to standardize on some sort of interfaces, or if, but if there are, things that we could pull into test infra that you'd be interested in sharing.
No, absolutely.
That'd be interesting.
I'd love to share all of it. I do think the Kube update service could be useful for dev tests. And I mean, there's some others like the running DNS on all the nodes so that all of the host names are always the same. I'm looking at adding OVN and OVS support so that ultimately even so all the control plane nodes would run the OVN control plane, and so that all of the nodes would always even have the same IPs essentially. Now there is a design flaw or design consideration rather. Kubernetes cloud provider interface only ever provides the node name. So from VMware's perspective, the vSphere cloud provider gets the host FQDN from the guest. So I didn't demo this, but if you looked at the host FQDN, it includes a hash in the middle to guarantee that the FQDN is unique, because we are running into issues where multiple clusters were spinning up for conformance testing and subsequent ones would always fail. And it was because the cloud provider could never resolve the host. And so that's really just more attuned to the cloud provider interface. But certain patterns like that, I think could make their way into other things, other projects, which is really, I think, one of the main impetus for sharing it. It's like, maybe there's some useful ideas here.
I like the name of that variable.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for that demo. And we have a few minutes left to potentially start. Will, I don't know how you are feeling about things. I think technically this, mostly ends at 1:30 or, 30 minutes past the hour. Not sure what time zone you're in. But we could start talking about the, ways to de-GitHubify Pro. And we can see your video now, so you no longer look like a black box.
Okay. Yeah, great. So yeah, I'll just try to be brief just because, like you said, we have about 5 minutes. So thanks everybody for being here and listening. So basically the idea is, so I'm part of the Jenkins X community, and I've been doing a lot of work in Jenkins X around our support for various Git providers. And we've been using Prow for a while now. We use it, internally to test Jenkins X and to just manage the project, similar to the way the Kubernetes projects use it. And we also are, if you're not familiar with what Jenkins X is, just very briefly, what it is it's an attempt to kind of modernize Jenkins, and really it's an attempt to build an opinionated application development and delivery platform for Kubernetes, where the various components, including the CI engine, if you like, are pluggable. So you could use Jenkins, you could use Prow, you could use something else. And so basically, we've been incorporating Prow in Jenkins X with that in mind, and what we kind of like is sort of in line with what I understand you folks have been talking about for a while now, which is just making it less tightly coupled to GitHub and kind of just more generic and flexible in terms of, specifically, at least in the short term, in terms of providing support for these different Git providers, but then also, as a more general note, I don't know what what kind of conversations you've had about this more general idea of, kind of just making Prow more flexible and generic in general. But I feel like this Git piece is just kind of one piece that could be part of a broader effort to do that, to kind of just make it, be this standalone project, which I think I think the consensus, at least from our side, is that it's, Prow is awesome. We love Prow. And it certainly has the potential to be that, if it can be made more generic. And so really, I just wanted to bring that up here and to kind of just say, like, hey, I'm here, and we would like to start contributing to this, to whatever efforts are ongoing, and kind of be part of that conversation. So really, I kind of, more than talking, I really wanted to just sort of hear from you folks, where those efforts are and what your thoughts about kind of what I've said so far are.
So actually, Prow is not only working for GitHub right now. I made Prow to work with Jared, and we also make Prow to work with PubSub. So imagine you can just we currently only report the Prow job result to a PubSub, but potentially we can also trigger a Prow job from PubSub. If you want to make Prow for a new Git provider, it's as simple as write your own trigger and write your own report the result back. I think the biggest thing is we have a lot of Git automations. For example, Tide is based on GitHub queries. I don't think that's very easy to mimic on other Git providers. Also, we have all those GitHub label management stuff. I think the root issue is the API will be very different across different Git providers.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Will, do you? First of all, are you on the there's a Prow channel now on the Kubernetes Slack, and so in terms of for going forward, this might be a good place to start having these conversations beyond the scope of this meeting. And yeah, I do think that but yeah, in general, I think that everybody's interested in reducing the cost of integrating with a new provider. With new providers. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that if I understand correctly, in the meeting, I watched the recording for the meeting of July, I think it was July 17th, and some of you folks talked about just having like sort of a generic Git provider interface of some kind. We have something like that in Jenkins X. It would have to be very different for Prow, just because in Jenkins X it's currently a single process, and so you can just make it an interface, and with different implementations of it, there doesn't have to be there's no IPC happening, right? So it's a lot simpler. So I mean, I understand that idea is a much bigger one when you talk about it in the context of Prow. But is that something that is still in the mix? That idea of just sort of creating this generic Git interface layer that you could have multiple implementations of, like for GitHub or whatever else it might be.
First, sorry, go ahead, Cole.
I think we're certainly open to the idea. I think we're just a little eager to see an actual like API or interface that'd be consistent between all of the Git providers. If we can actually get some sort of like plan for that, then that's certainly something we'd like to have. But it just seems a little tricky to pull off right now.
Sure. Yeah.
I think part of the challenge here will be, potentially trying to distinguish like what things, like probably triggering a build and kicking off testing, like maybe that is easier to abstract to everything versus, something like Tide or maybe a lot of our label plugins, right, that add or remove this label. Like, I don't know if, that doesn't really have a great corollary in Git and Garrett. I don't know about other systems, right? But yeah, I do think that, figuring out a good interface. I know that there have been a lot of the people who are working on the pipeline and build CRD are thinking about working on a trigger CRD. And so at some point, I think that would be a good thing for this group to participate in or, figure out. And I think that, so I think everybody's very interested in all of that. I'd love for there to be a world where, it's very easy for, some new provider to hand prow a thing, which then can be, essentially prow magically starts working with that hosting service.
Mm-hmm.
And so figuring that out, I think, is something that everybody is interested in. We just need people, and maybe this could be you, who are willing to design it and implement it.
Okay, yeah. Well, in that case, I'll come up with some ideas. Maybe I'll come up with a preliminary document and just kind of present it for some initial feedback if it sounds reasonable.
Yeah, sounds great. And then happy, maybe this warrants some more discussion next week. I think we're a couple of minutes over. And so maybe we'll box it there. But this sounds pretty exciting. And thanks everybody for coming, and see you online and potentially next week.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thanks, Will. Thanks everybody else. Bye.